shot towards the end zone. Under touchdown. Trey Tucker. To the end zone it goes. Caught. Touchdown. Armon Ben.
It's Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network. I'm your host, Russ Seltman. It's my co-host, Neil Meyer, coming at you on whatever podcast platforms you subscribe to: Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon. Find us on all the big podcast platforms. Plus, you can catch us on Talking Cats with Russ Seltman, the YouTube page there. All the full video and audio episodes posted there as well, twice a week, every week. Neil Meyer of the frontofficenews.com, Cincinnati Rivals, and Russ Seltman, yours truly, of Cincinnati Bearcats on SI. We're going to get to a Miami Battle for the Victory Bell preview, what could be the final trip ever to Yager Stadium for Cincinnati football. But before that, we have some interesting hardwood news to get to, with Cincinnati basketball adding a French big man to the fold, and Halvine Dzellat. We will get into that. I think it might be Zella, actually, pronounced Zella, but with a name that does not look like it is pronounced that way. We are excited to get Halvine into the program and see what he can do as a redshirt player in his first year, and then he will be a full part of the program in the 2025-26 season. Get into that. We have obviously some offensive keys to the game against Miami, some defensive keys to the game against Miami. We'll give our picks as well before we get out of here in what is expected to be another tightly contested matchup, with Cincinnati opening as a 2.5-point favorite and now moving to 3.5 points on the betting spread. Before we do all that, though, I want to tell you about Bet Online. It's the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our over $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet Online. The game starts here. And Neil will start with Halvine Dzellat on the board with the Cincinnati Bearcats. He is going to be a part of the program as a practice player, redshirting in 2024-25, and then joining the team fully as another part of that big man rotation at 6'10". Played for Lille in the France Pro B League this past season, 6.1 points per game in 19 minutes, and was a captain, I believe, on the FIFA U20 Eurobasket team. Averaged 8 points, 4.4 rebounds across the 7 games in that international competition. Interesting addition, Neil, a late addition to this class for Cincinnati, and one that I think could help sharpen the front court a lot in practice this offseason or this season, and give them a solid piece to keep battling against these giants in the Big 12 in 25-26.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a big time addition in Halvine Dzellat, obviously coming from France. He played on the U20 FIBA team. But Russ, for me, I think this is a big addition for Cincinnati, obviously due to the size they have there in the front court. It's just kind of Aziz Bandaogo, Arrington Page, and Tyler McKinley there in the front court. Obviously, Dzellat won't be playing this season. Obviously, from the talks that we've been hearing, it sounds like it's going to be a redshirt year, which was expected if in this situation, obviously, with all 15 roster spots being full in Cincinnati.
Right, there's no scholarship to give him, so it's tough.
Overall, I think this is a big time addition, because anytime you can add somebody from overseas, especially, which has taken off in the recruiting realms, that has played at the professional level, and somebody at his size at 6'10", 230 pounds is huge. You not only get to add him for a practice player, but he now has a full year in the Monster Factory with Coach Rayfeld as well. So It's going to be interesting to see how that really develops in what could be next year. He might be 6'10", 245, 250. You never know. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how things will play out for him. But it's a big time addition, especially for years going forward. With Cincinnati having the ability to potentially lose 5 or 6 guys after this season, it's a big time spot. It's a big time spot. And that's kind of a position, Russ, where they might look at it and say they might use Tyler McKinley at the 4 instead of that 5 in the near future. So it gives Cincinnati some options there as well. So, but I think this is a big time addition as well.
great point, Neil, bringing up how just it's great to get guys each and every year for a recruiting class, but to get a guy a year early before you know you're going to even have access to playing him, but still getting him integrated, kind of like a quarterback going in for a redshirt year coming out of college in the NFL. You get to fully integrate into the program. You get to fully integrate and see what is going to be asked of you in a American basketball sense at the collegiate level. And then you can kind of internalize all that over this season and really hit the ground running next year. That's a great point. I think it's something that if it was able to be done more often for coaches and for programs all across the country, I think they would do it. And this has been obviously a nice opportunity that's presented itself for Cincinnati to get a player of this caliber and be able to have him on campus as part of the student body a year before you even have him able to be out there for games. So like you mentioned, I think especially this season, looking at how it can impact, just anytime you can get this kind of body, 6'10", 230 plus pounds into your practice facility, into your practices, and out, instead of having to bang down low with a Tyler McKinley all the time or an Arrington Page, you get a little bit less, what am I looking for? A little bit less tread on the tires for those guys in practice. It could end up really helping them down the stretch of what we know, Neil, is going to be one of, along with every other team in the Big 12, one of the toughest schedules in the entire country. I mean, what do we look at all last year at ESPN Basketball Power Index? It was like the top 25, top 20 schedules in terms of overall strength of schedule at the end of the year. The Big 12 had a spot on basically every one of those in the top, every one they could possibly have in the top 20. So it's going to be a really, really difficult schedule. And you need to have, like we saw last year with the injuries that hit this team, as much depth as you can possibly maintain, especially practice depth and day-to-day depth outside of games, could be really impactful. So I think this is a great signing for Cincinnati basketball and a cool kind of bridge player that, had he come to the program this time next year, I don't think would have made as big of an impact as he's going to have in the first few months of the 25 season, because he will have already been in the program for this long. Take a quick break, and then we'll get to football after touching on the hardwood to start this Bearcat Blitz. Battle for the victory bell, Neil. We've had some few days to wash away the Pitt stink. I think it's off the team. I feel like they had a solid week of practice. From what we saw on Tuesday, vibes were high. Guys were still having fun. It didn't seem like there has been any breaking of confidence, breaking of morale among this program. And the number one positive that I think, because I was a little too negative, I will say, on the Tuesday show, reacting to that just face plant on Saturday afternoon. But Brendan Sorsby, man, he has been fantastic. And before we get to the Miami matchup, and we start with the offensive keys of the game, and this is kind of bridging us to the offensive keys from the discussion of Brendan Sorsby, Neil, he's self-aware and he's playing good football all at the same time. And that's exactly what you could want out of your starting quarterback. Top 15, or excuse me, I think he's 16th nationally right now in ESPN's QBR metric, one spot above Texas's Quinn Ewers, although Texas obviously has played a little bit tougher competition so far to start the year than Brendan Sorsby and the Bearcats, but just goes to show how strong he's played through the first two games of the season. 5 touchdowns, no interceptions, over 500 yards passing. He's taken care of the football very well. Sailed a couple passes here and there, and those were more prevalent after the ankle got a little dinged up in the game against Pitt. And we saw that ankle taped up on Saturday pretty heavily. So that's maybe something to monitor. But overall, Neil, the first thing he said in his press conference when he talked about what he can do to improve his play was identify those sailed passes. And that, to me, is the number one thing he has to work on. Bing, bang, boom. This is a quarterback that I think Bearcats fans can confidently say, above all else, they have the right guy to be able to get them back to bowl status this year. It's just about all the other things filling in around him and meeting his level of play, which has been pretty, I wouldn't say stellar so far, but very solid to even very good, I think you can say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody knows that the key to Cincinnati getting to a bowl game this season all relies on the play of Brendan Sorsby on the offensive end. If you get great play from Brendan Sorsby, which they have through the first 2 weeks, overall, this offense could really do a lot of great things. I mean, Russ, we've seen it in the first 2 weeks. Some of these throws that Brendan Sorsby has made have been throws that have kind of wowed you. And maybe you look back from a season ago that if Cincinnati connects on those passes, they might have been sitting in a different situation a year ago. However, the thing is, Brendan Sorsby, Russ, has been very, very calm in the pocket. And he comes out, he doesn't have this cocky demeanor to it. He knows that it's all about business. He knows he's there to play ball. He knows what he's got to work on, despite only having 7 games of starting quarterback experience coming into this season. You look at what he said the first few lines of his press conference this week. He knew what he had to work on. He knew what he had to do better in preparation, and he took blame for what happened on Saturday with the missed passes, the overthrows. He took blame there. You don't see a young guy taking that responsibility that much in college football. You just don't. And overall, with him to play, it's going to be a huge key to the game on Saturday. If Cincinnati can get another solid, great performance out of Brendan Sorsby, could open up a lot of things. Obviously, this is going to be a game on Saturday that it could go one of two ways. It could go a high-scoring game, or it's going to be a low-scoring game, and it's going to be a battle to the very end. But I think for the offensive side of things, everybody knows it all kind of starts with the play of Brendan Sorsby.
Yeah, Neil, that's typically how football games go. You either have a high score or a low score.
Yep. You never know in between. Never know. With this being a rivalry game, though, you never know. I mean, considering Miami didn't have their media availability early in the week, they scrapped that. They're
going 0 dark 30 entering this one.
Outside of all the outside noise heading into this one, it's going to be interesting on Saturday, to say the least.
Well, let's get to that preview. Starting on the offensive side of the football, just some numbers entering this matchup. Cincinnati 3.5-point betting favorite as of this writing. I believe that the point total has been bet up from 45.5 points to 46.5 points as of this writing. So a little bit lower scoring contest expected this week, Neil, than last week. And when you look at overall, Cincinnati, a 54.6% matchup predictor favorite on ESPN to win this contest and get the job done at Yager Stadium. First trip to Yager since 2017. And Cincinnati is tied all time in this series. Just a crazy number. 60, 60, and 7 all time after falling in the 2023 matchup, which was the first loss in 16 consecutive games between these two teams. Offensively, Neil, Cincinnati bringing a pretty decent squad to the table here. They moved the ball well again on Saturday. Not so much in the second half, but very much so in the first half. It's a rock and a hard place between this matchup on this side of the ball. Northwestern got stifled by Miami's defense in the game, or first game of the season for the Red Hawks. Now Northwestern stinks. Their offense is going to be bottom 20 nationally throughout the whole season. They're a bottom 40 team in the entire country, but they still were held to 1 touchdown, 2 field goals, 13 total points. They return 8 of their 13 defenders. Miami does, Neil, that played at least 300 snaps last season. That includes a defensive player of the year in the Mid-American Conference, and Matt Salopek, who was fantastic in the game last year and is the key heart and soul of this run defense that I think Cincinnati is largely going to have to lean on, because Neil, this Red Hawks secondary is very strong. This defense overall is very strong. They don't give up a ton of big plays. So I think those deep balls from Brendan Sorsby may not happen at all this weekend. They may not be available out there with the way Miami and Chuck Martin's team plays defense. This feels like a ball control game to me, Neil, a game where they're going to have to grind out a lot of long drives, given how little explosive play action the defense that they're facing gives up. And they're going to probably have another 3 to 4, maybe 5 red zone chances again, like they had last season. And what happened last season? They went 1 for 5 on scoring touchdowns in those chances. You got to go, at least in my opinion, 3 for 5, 4 for 5. Find a way, if you enter that red zone 4+ times, to get 3 touchdowns out of it. It's going to be difficult. I think it's going to be tight, but overall, to me, this offense is going to have to grind through this game, own the time of possession, lean on Corey Kiner. I'm looking for him to get close to 30 carries in this one. really lean on your biggest strength of your program in the biggest game of the season, in the biggest game of Scott Satterfield's tenure thus far. Let's just call it how it is. This is the biggest game that he has played, that he has coached in this city, in this program. And he can lean, in my opinion, on his biggest strength as a coach in the tenure as a head coach, and that's his rushing attacks and his offensive lines he's been able to build. This is a strong one in Cincinnati. Looks like Philip Wilder doesn't seem like he's going to be out there, Neil. I don't imagine seeing him out there. It was a lot of DeAndre Buford again in this week at right tackle. So that looks like what they're going to roll with at the offensive line. And to me, it's a grind out type of game where you lean on Corey Kiner, you limit the possessions for Miami as much as possible. You don't give that lowly offense more cracks at the gun to get a big play or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 11 like they had last year in that matchup. To me, you limit the possessions, you grind this game down, and you try to win a 21-17, 24-20 type of matchup that way. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with you there, Russ. Obviously, you hit the nail on the head when you talk about red zone. When you get into the red zone versus Miami, you cannot go 1 for 5 like they did last season. And they had plenty of opportunities there a season ago. But Scott Satterfield,
amidst Neil, a kicking game right now that you don't even know if you can trust inside the red zone kicking field goals, given how bad the snapping's been, how shaky the field goal kicking's been, and Carter Brown and who else? Nathan Hawks are now in a kicking competition apparently, which Scott Satterfield dropped on his Tuesday radio show. Special teams shaky to say the least right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a shaky topic right there in the special teams, but Scott Satterfield alluded to it in his Tuesday press conference in the afternoon that when they get the opportunity, they cannot settle for 3. They have to find a way to put 7 on the board because as we saw versus Pitt, Russ, the missed field goal came down to haunt Cincinnati. Despite it only being a 25-yarder attempt, the whole execution on it, the snap was off a little bit, the laces were in on the hold, the kick was off. They have to find a way to capitalize in the red zone, especially versus Miami. They have really given teams trouble because, Russ, if you dig deep enough on Miami, the only time they gave up more than 21 points a season ago was to Cincinnati at Nippert Stadium. And on top of that, you playing a defense that returns 8 of their players from a season ago, led by Matt Zalapak there in the middle of the defense. And I mean, he's a beast. He's averaging nearly 9-10 tackles a game. He's all over the place. So for Cincinnati, I think this one, Russ, I think if Corey Kiner doesn't get 25 to 30 carries this week, it's going to be interesting because in a game where it's a rivalry matchup, you have to rely on your best option, and that is Corey Kiner. And he even said it himself this week. He said, last year was unacceptable versus Miami. But when you have a guy as hot as Corey Kiner is, averaging 7.5 yards per carry, and I said this on Tuesday's show with Jeff Trenenpole, show of Sports with Strawberry Ice, you have to rely on him. When a guy is averaging 7.5 yards per carry, getting to the second level, you have to feed him at all times, even in the short situations. But he was running hard on Saturday. It did at times look like he was gassed, but 7.5 yards per carry, you got to find a way to continue to carry the rock and move the chains. Because in that situation, Russ, history could repeat itself. And if they don't give the ball that many times up when your running back's running that heavy, things could go south. So I think this is going to be a game where Corey Kiner gets 25 carries. I'll be the first one to say it. I think we see him hit that 25 carry mark. It could be a career high days, but Cincinnati, red zone struggles. You have to find a way to put 7 on the board. And I'm there with you, Russ. You have to, if you go 3 out of 5 times in the red zone for 7, cool. But if you can go 4 for 5, absolutely, you take that any day. That's 28 points right there. And anytime you get in the red zone, you have.
And it would be shocking, Neil, to see Miami score 28 points with this offense. We'll get to it in a minute, but I mean, if you score 28 points in the red zone, that should be all she wrote.
And with the red zone on this topic of heading into Miami, Joey Belgian back in practice this week.
Yeah, that's I forgot to mention that. Good note, Neil. It looks like he's going to play, like practicing like intensively. Like it seemed like Joey's getting close to 100%.
Making the
maybe not 100%, but close to playing level in terms.
So he was back in practice earlier this week. That's a huge sign for Cincinnati. Obviously, teams are going to cover Joe Royer. Francis Sherman was wide open a couple times, but they go other ways. But Joey Belgian now gives you another big red zone target, something he did well at Western Kentucky. Then you have Gavin Grover. The tight end room is fully healthy right now. So that's a great sign to see. It's going to be interesting to see Me personally, Russ, I would be hopeful to see a lot more 12 personnel. If you see that, you saw what it did versus Pitt. It really opened things up. On the drive, they did go 12. It opened up a 32-yard for Joe Royer. And then the very next following play, it opened up the 11-yard touchdown after Gavin Grover slides out. Joe Royer there on a post move. It's a touchdown. So overall, I think the Cincinnati tight ends, this could be a week where the Cincinnati tight ends are heavily involved. But you got to find a way to get Corey Kiner the rock at least 25 times, in my opinion, this week.
And they need more production out of their tight ends, Neil. It's been Joy Royer, and that's about it, playing well so far. I mean, Devin Zahersky's up there with a 69.4 grade on PFF, but he's only played 5 snaps. Francis Sherman has struggled. 56 snaps, 59.9 PFF grade so far. And Gavin Grover, 11 snaps in 2 games, 60.3 PFF grade. You can't really take as much away from 11 snaps right there, but they could really use another body in that tight end room to give them some solid snaps and start bringing the floor of that room up higher to the ceiling we've seen from Joe Royer in this offense. Going to be interesting, Neil, against the 35th ranked defense right now, according to Bill Connolly's S&P Plus rankings. They were very strong last season, 11-3 record for Miami, Mid-American Conference champions, and they did a lot of that without a starting quarterback who will be back with the team and hopefully not back in the nightmares of Bearcats fans, because that's where he lived last fall. Brett Gabbert and the Miami offense, how do they match up against the Bearcat defense? We'll close out the show on that topic coming up next. Can UC's defense stay away from the big play? That is the number one key to me, Neil, in this game. Can you limit big plays, something of which they have not done at all so far this season? They didn't do it all last season, and it's the biggest kind of hang up for me to ultimately picking the Bearcats, which, spoiler alert, I'm going to at the end of this soliloquy here, but 13 big plays allowed against Pitt, Neil, 23 missed tackles through 2 games. 23 missed tackles through 2 games. That's got to get cleaned up. The push on the interior has to get better. We asked Tyson Veit about it this week. He noted how they're shuffling in a lot of guys, and they're ultimately just trying to keep that mantra going to keep guys fresh and eventually maybe get some breakthroughs as guys get more reps. And maybe we'll see. He talked about maybe trying to get Dante Corleone a little bit more snap diet, a higher snap diet this week. I would imagine we'll see that. Dante's looked good at practice. There hasn't been any reported hang-ups or mix-ups or anything with the blood clots. Nothing like that happened after game 1. So that was fantastic to see. We should see an unleashed Dante Corleone this week. He had a 76.3 PFF grade in the opening game of the season for him against Pitt. I would imagine that'll be in the 80s against what should be a offensive line that Cincinnati can match up against well, and that Dante Corleone should be able to wreck, Neil. This is a rough-looking offense overall. They only rushed for, I think, like 30 to 33 yards total against Northwestern a couple of weeks ago. Overall, they're just not going to bring a whole lot to the table on that front. You're worried about the rush defense of Cincinnati, but you're not really worried about it in this matchup because they didn't show the ability to run against a better than average Northwestern defense, but not elite Northwestern defense. And they were only about 65th nationally, Miami was last season in average rushing yards per game. So they shouldn't be able to control the clock or own the time of possession on that front. And then, Neil, you add in the fact that they lost Rashad Amos, their big-time running back last year. They lost Gage Larvadain, their big-time wide receiver. Brett Gabbert is back, but they don't really have a ton of
playmakers,
scare you playmakers at all. There shouldn't be a lot of opportunities for Miami to make big plays happen in this game. Cincinnati, I'm looking for them to do a lot of zone coverage, keeping a lot of this offense in front of them. There aren't a lot of speedsters on this Miami team. I don't think there's a lot of guys that could do what Desmond Reed did and go 40, 50, 60 yards to the house off a yards after catch, little wiggle in the middle of the field. So to me, it's pretty simple. You keep the Miami offense in front of you. You don't let them create big plays as much as you possibly can. You force them, like Miami is going to force Cincinnati's offense, to execute in the red zone. And we'll see what happens with that kind of mentality. On top of that, Neil, can they find a way pull off a turnover or two when these interceptions hit them square in the hands. They're hitting them square in the hands, and they are just not finding a way to come down with these interceptions. You got to think they get one, maybe two of those if they're lucky this week around, and that can be a way to flip more possessions to Cincinnati. Overall, Neil, it's just I'm picking the Bearcats 24-21 here. I think they get the job done. They don't quite cover the number, but they get the job done in what will be a weird, odd, some doinky bounces of the ball type of game on the road against Yager Stadium. There's always weird stuff that happens in this game when it's played at Yager Stadium. So that's why I'm going a little tighter on the matchup here. But overall, Neil, like this Cincinnati team should be able to execute and close out this game across a full 60 minutes. I don't think they should trail in this game. When you compare the talent level of this Cincinnati team to the talent level of this Miami team, it's just going to come down to simple mistakes not being made by this Bearcats team. I didn't even talk about the penalties, which they should be able to avoid those dumb penalties you think this week. I don't think you think hopefully Cameron Wilson's going to be keeping his mouth shut in those late game scenarios and not calling out disconcerting calls or anything like that. You would hope that doesn't happen. And if they don't have those shoot yourself in the foot type of mistakes, then they should win the game based on execution, talent, and the want to end this rivalry strong and get that bad taste out of your mouth and get above 500 and stay above 500 the rest of the way. Because if you lose this game, Neil, you fall to 1-2, and you got a Houston team coming to Cincinnati next week. Who knows what kind of fanfare support you're going to have for that game? Who knows how much this thing could start slipping away? The time is now. The season is on the line, in my opinion, in terms of fanfare expectations for the rest of the home games and the excitement for this fan base for the rest of the year. Go make a statement against your rival. I think they do. They get the job done 24-21. What are you rolling with?
It's funny you say it. I actually had 24-21 as well, but the reason I'm saying that is
we did not coordinate this.
The reason I'm saying this for Cincinnati on the defensive side of the ball, Russ, you mentioned it. You have to find ways to get turnovers. Find a way to contain Brett Gabbert. I think our linebacker core is a step up from where it was last season, despite it only being 2 games. Brett Gabbert ran all over Cincinnati last season in the run game while airing it out for almost 290 yards on only 12 of 20 passing, then had another 100, near 100 in the run game. Was literally carrying Miami last season. They expect him to do that again this year and carry Miami. That's all they got on offense. I don't expect them to come out and put up a press coverage or man-to-man coverage on the first play of the game, which results in an 80-yard touchdown. I don't expect that to happen this year on the first play of the game. They don't have the speedy wide receiver in Gage Larverdin. He's down at Tulane. They lose Rashad Amos. Like you mentioned, their offense doesn't have those dynamic playmakers that they have. They still have some pieces, but they don't have the playmakers like they had a year ago. But Russ, for the defensive side of this game, you got to find a way to wrap Brett Gabbert up and contain him. Scott Satterfield mentioned it. You had opportunities versus Pitt. You have to find a way to get to the backfield, create pressures, and then rely on the back end. If you can get that pressure.
And what did we talk about on Monday, Neil, or Tuesday? 25 pressures, 2 sacks, right? Or one sack, 2 sacks.
Find a way to contain in the backfield.
Not good enough.
And wrap the quarterback up. Now, this is another worth mentioning. Josh Minkins was listed as day-to-day earlier this week. He has not been given a status that we know of right now heading into this one, Russ. Obviously, he wasn't able to finish the Pittsburgh game. That's going to be something to keep an eye on. If Minkins isn't able to go, expect Derek Canteen to slide over to the full safety spot and the strong safety, Logan Wilson to slide to the full safety. There we go. That could be your 2 guys stepping in. But Cincinnati, find a way to get some turnovers here. They struggled with it last year. But you cannot have missed opportunities, especially in a game like this, Russ, where this could potentially be the last time this game is played outside of 2026. So they got to find a way to capitalize on what Miami's giving you. Those opportunities don't come often. So when they do come, find a way to turn those turnovers into points on the other end. But it starts with the pressure up front. If you can get to Brett Gabbert and make him uncomfortable and make him into some situations where he might be able to give you a free one, you got to take it and run with it, but you got to find ways to start getting pressure up front.
Getting that pressure is happening. Can they close the pressure?
Can they close it? Is the thing. That's the great thing.
Good question. And we'll get answers to that question on Saturday. Good stuff from Neil. Fun preview, a fun news and notes on Cincinnati basketball, adding a player, Halvine Dzellat. Congratulations to him on joining the Cincinnati fold, and we hope you'll add some more listeners to the fold. Share the show with all the Bearcats fans you know in your life. And we'll be back at it on Monday to recap the battle for the victory bell as Cincinnati travels to play Miami on the road. This has been Bearcat Blitz on the Believe Network.
6, Ritter to the end zone, looking for Pierce. Did he hang on? Yes. Touchdown. Back as I've been around. Here he goes again. Busts free. Jerome Ford down the sideline. Foot race. House call. Touchdown. 79 yards. Big one in the Peach Bowl. This is a big one too. And it's going to go all the way to the house on the first play